international players also want to play in India. So I think people are also learning from each other and trying to follow best practices, which is also helping the industry.
So is there a possibility of more acquisitions happening, like the DBS Cholamandalam Asset Management, or the more recent acquisition of Fidelity?
Actually, acquisition, we are not looking at acquisition for the sake of acquisition. This is a very planned strategy. The strategy is that one important point I want to clarify upfront. We have chosen to be a diversified non-banking finance company, entity I should say. It's not one company, there are many companies. And the idea behind that is that you should be able to manage the vagaries of individual sectors well, in the sense if there is cycles well. So we are addressing different cycles. We are addressing industrial cycle, rural cycle and infrastructure cycle, and all of them do not go up and down simultaneously. So what we have said is that we want to be in varied business segment and various areas. It is also important from the point of view of long-term sustainable growth. If you are a niche one product company, it's difficult for us to imagine that for a long-term sustainable period you will be able to grow. So you need to have products whereby you will be able to garner their savings, and you need to have ability to make sure that their assets are insured by you. So it is this philosophy which has prompted us to get into some of these areas, and we also thought that scale is important, and that is why we initially made a small beginning in the mutual fund sector to acquisition of DBS Chola. But since scale is important, balanced portfolio is important, distribution is important, we made a bid for this Fidelity asset. So I think I just spent a little time in explaining this because there is a very systematic planning in this entire strategy for acquisition. Same is the case with that housing finance, because you see, if you look at L&T Finance, L&T Finance does equipment financing today. It does equipment financing in rural markets, urban markets, semi-urban markets. So it has a huge customer base now. That customer base also requires different products. Many of them have their income generating capacity has gone up. Their families are becoming wealthy. So they have now aspiration to have housing. So building a business around the same customer, using the customer as the focus point and building around that, that is the reason why we and of course we believe that as far as housing is concerned, it is going to have very long term future in India, because there is a lot of scope, penetration is low. So it is in this context that we did this acquisition. However, currently our bandwidth is full. We have to make sure that these businesses which we have acquired, they are integrated, they are stabilized, and the entire energy of the group is being spent on this. So immediately there are no other plans.
Human resources remain the key to success for any business transformation exercise. So how do you retain talent?
You see, that is where the advantage of the parent comes. If you look at L&T, L&T is in existence for the last 75 years in India, and all businesses in which L&T Group is in today, they are all people-oriented businesses. And L&T Group has developed the ability of attracting, retaining and nurturing talent. It's a different type of talent. In L&T Group, we have a large engineering talent. But at the same time, in other areas also, like finance and accounts or human resources, L&T has been able to use the same principles for attracting talent. So one point is that there is a proven track record of attracting, retaining talent. And why does it happen? It happens because L&T is a unique organization. It's a professionally managed company. People can grow to any level in L&T. For example, the current chairman of the group, he joined as a junior engineer, and today he is the chairman of the group. It doesn't happen in many organizations. So this is one important thing, and those who have aspirations to grow, they can grow to any level. There is no limit. Merit is the only consideration here. So that is one important point why people join, and there we have nurtured this meritocracy for many decades. So that is one, and the same principle we are following in the financial services. But that is not enough. That is one hygiene factor, I should say. But in addition to that, there are several other things which are important. The other important thing is the culture in the organization, the values which you follow. See, L&T is known for excellence of its products, also very high ethical standards, governance practices, transparency of dealing with all its stakeholders. I think all these values are extremely important in financial services. Financial services business also thrives on trust and integrity.
So what's your competitive edge in a fast growing and competitive market like India?
See, as I said earlier, we have chosen to be diversified, and I believe that is a competitive strength, because it will enable us to grow in a sustainable manner for a long period of time. And therefore, we are not exposed to the vagaries of one sector or one cycle. And if there is some problem in one of these sectors, I think the others compensate for that, and we have experienced that in the past. For example, if you are talking of commercial vehicle financing, that industry is a very cyclical industry and it goes up and down. So if you are only focused on one sector, it is possible that you will be caught in the downturn very severely.
So in decision making, how do you integrate and balance strategic imperatives and financial control?
I think I mentioned to you that we are building a long-term business, and therefore, as far as strategy is concerned, strategy has to be based on what we want to do over a period of time, long period of time, and for that one has to make sure that some risk one takes in the business. If the conviction is strong that for in long term it's going to pay out, one has to take some bold decision, and that's what we have tried to do. We believe strongly that mutual fund industry in India is under-penetrated, and there is significant scope for that industry to do well. And if one gets bogged down by the immediate future, that means or immediate past, the industry has not done well, in the sense there has not been significant growth because of various factors. Industry has not done well, and if one were to take strategic decision based on these, I think one would not take a decision of acquiring or growing in that sector. But we believe strongly that if India has to grow, all the sector in financial services have to grow.
So you spent a long career with L&T, and you worked under various chairmen of Larsen and Toubro. So how did it shape your career?
Well, I think this is again a very interesting question. You see, the beauty of L&T is that you work with many people, and all have some strengths. When I started at that time, Mr. Hoklakson was very much there, and he was the chairman at that point in time, and he was a visionary, very simple man, but absolute visionary. So interacting with him was such a fantastic pleasure. There was no place for small things in his thought process at all. So he was always long term, looking at, and at the same time he had a fantastic assessment of people. So if you interact with him for on two, three occasions, you can make out that he understood people. He will talk about people, and that teaches you a lot of things as to how do we assess people in your career. This is just a point. There are several other things one learned from him. Before Mr. Nayak took over, Mr. Kulkarni was the managing director of L&T, and I was working with him. In any case, I was working with him for many years because he was the head of finance function before he became MD. Mr. Kulkarni, I think there are a number of things one learned from him. One important thing is he's a man of very few words, but in those few words he will express very, very effectively. Secondly, he has very sharp understanding of impact of finance on business. So how do we use the finance function for managing risk in the organization, at the same time become business, friend, if you will. It's not really friend, but actually business enabler. How do we make sure that finance function becomes a business enabler, and work towards that? The third important point is that he is a great listener, and any new ideas you take to him, he has tremendous patience, and he used to, all these qualities are very important for a leader. and it was a tremendous joy working with him. And Mr. Nayak now, we have seen Mr. Nayak since 1999 as the leader, a complete entrepreneur. So that entrepreneurship he has brought to the company, and I think ability to take risk is something which all of us have learnt from Mr. Nayak. A very courageous person. He doesn't hesitate to take bold decisions. Also very strategic, tremendous business acumen, relationship orientation. I think there are several qualities of Mr. Nayak which I can describe. And at the end of the day, if you look at all these three persons whom I mentioned, they are all great human beings, because leaders also need to be extremely good human beings. And that is what I have learned from all of them. And I really cherish this fantastic memory.
So is the need for extraordinary risk taking along like also thinking like an entrepreneur key to success in business today?
I don't understand what is the meaning of extraordinary risk taking, but I think business is full of risk, and unless one is able to take risk, you can't grow. I think any decision which you take in business, there are some risk involved in that. In your day-to-day operations also, you are taking some risk. However, you need to have ability to understand those risks, mitigate those risks and manage those risks. So if you have that risk management framework, you can definitely control your operations extremely well. However, that won't make you an entrepreneur. For that, you need to have some intuitive capabilities. Some intuition is required. Also, long-term vision is required, conviction is required, and courage. All these factors are important. And unless that is there, it is difficult for any entrepreneur or any businessman to build long-term business.
So in your vast experience, what lessons have you learned in managing growth, especially during the slowdown?
I think there are three important points in this. The first point is that I would say that slowdown should not be considered as a problem. Slowdown also throws lots of opportunities, and therefore it's very important for us to keep our ears and eyes open and grab those opportunities, because if you are fundamentally a sound organization, and if you have cash and if you are liquid, I think that's the absolute time, I think this a superb time to grow. That means build your business. Slowdown provides opportunities for you to grow. Number one. Second, it is not necessarily slow down, but in any circumstances, I think one has to understand the importance of liquidity and cash. And particularly in this slowdown, people have to make sure that they conserve and use cash very, very judiciously. And what has happened, if you remember, in 2008, when we had this world crisis, in India as well as globally, many companies went through a lot of pain. I am not boasting, but L&T was probably one of the few companies which did not have any difficulty. We did not send any signals to the businesses in terms of slow growth. We also told them, if you have expansion plans, don't put them on hold, because if you start acting, if you have a knee-jerk reaction, it can create more harm. But it was possible for us to send these signals to them only because L&T was liquid and we had raised cash at the most appropriate time. It is still doing good for the group. I think it's very important that these times one needs to understand the importance of cash and liquidity. And the third important element is that during this particular period of time, people have to focus on productivity and cost. That's very important. You have to tighten your belt, because this is a good time. This is a good time for you to build systems which will support you long term in terms of productivity and cost. And if there is any complacency or slackness in the organization, this is an excellent time to tighten this.